My ex-husband walked into my office yesterday, resume in hand, and the job he was begging for? It was mine to give. The same man who left me for a younger woman, younger, prettier, and in his words, more exciting, now needed me to save him. 3 years ago, if you'd told me this would happen, I'd have laughed, or cried, or both. Because back then, I was the one begging him not to walk away, begging him to remember the life we'd built together. Begging for answers that never came. But before we get to him standing in my office, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, I need you to understand the life I thought we had, and how fast it all shattered. Back then, my life looked perfect on paper. I was married to David Alvarez, tall, charming, confident to the point of arrogance. We ran a boutique marketing consultancy together. He was the magnetic smile clients loved. I was the strategist who actually delivered results. It worked, at least I thought it did. We lived in a sleek condo with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the skyline. We had season tickets to the theater, took spontaneous weekend trips, and hosted dinner parties with our carefully curated circle of friends. I thought we were building something. A future, a legacy, a life where we was always the default. The morning that changed everything. It was a Tuesday, ordinary. I was in the kitchen making espresso. David was scrolling through his phone at the counter. The morning light was catching on his watch, the one I'd given him for our anniversary. "Carmen," he said, without looking up, "we need to talk about us." That phrase, "we need to talk," it's the death knell of so many marriages. Within minutes, my entire life unraveled. He'd been seeing someone else. Her name was Lily. 27, freshly minted MBA, long legs, and an effortless laugh that, according to him, made him feel alive again. Alive, as if the years we'd spent together had been slow suffocation. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't even try to justify it beyond saying, "It just happened." By the end of that week, we were separated. The divorce was swift and brutal. He got the condo and the majority of our shared clients because he was the one they'd seen schmoozing at dinners and conferences. I got the old apartment we'd lived in when we were broke and the 10-year-old Honda with the temperamental AC. He kept the Audi. Of course he kept the Audi. When the papers were signed, he didn't even look back as he left the lawyer's office. People talk about heartbreak like it's just sadness. It's not. It's confusion. It's panic. It's staring at a bank account with less than $3,000 and wondering how you're supposed to pay rent, utilities, and buy groceries when the person who is supposed to be your partner has gutted both your business and your life. For weeks, my diet consisted of instant ramen and whatever coffee I could brew at home. I took any freelance job I could find, writing copy for dentists, creating ad campaigns for mom and pop shops, building social media pages for people who thought hashtags were still a new thing. But humiliation is a strange kind of fuel. One night, over cheap wine, my best friend Sophia said, "Don't waste this, Carmen. Pain like this, it's rocket fuel if you use it right. You're smart. You're talented. You can build something better without him." At first, I thought she was just being supportive, but the more I sat with it, the more it hardened into resolve. I rebranded under my maiden name, Alvarez. I networked like my life depended on it, because it did. I said yes to projects I wasn't even sure I could handle, and then I figured them out. Year one was survival mode. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. My social life was non-existent. But slowly, things started to change. A happy client referred me to someone bigger. That someone bigger referred me to a brand that everyone knew. By year two, I'd hired my first employee, Monica, my assistant, who could juggle scheduling crises while making it look effortless. By year three, Alvarez Strategies was thriving. We had an office with my name on the glass door, a team I trusted, and a client list my old self could only dream about. I'd moved into a new apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows of my own. I'd traded the old Honda for a car that didn't rattle when I hit 60. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was winning. And then, on an otherwise ordinary Monday morning, Monica buzzed my office. "Your 10 o'clock is here," she said. "Special candidate, HR referral." "Send them in," I said, still reading a report. The door opened, and there he was, David. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, he still had those broad shoulders, but diminished. His hair was streaked with gray, his suit wasn't tailored, and he carried a leather folder that was creased and worn. For a second, we just stared at each other. "Carmen," he said finally, voice low, "thank you for seeing me." He told me his company with Lily had folded. She'd left him for a wealthier man, the kind who could buy her the life she thought she deserved. The clients followed her. He'd tried to rebuild, but doors kept closing. He needed a fresh start, and apparently, I was the person who could give it to him. If this had happened in year one, I would have laughed in his face, or cried, or both. But now I saw an opportunity. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's letting the person who underestimated you sit in your office, asking for help, knowing you hold all the power. I leaned back in my chair and said, HR will be in touch. Because this was just the opening move. The moment David's footsteps faded down the hallway, I buzzed my assistant. "Monica, hold my calls for the next hour." I opened my laptop, pulled up his resume from HR's system, and started reading. It was thin, shockingly thin for a man who used to brag about being indispensable in the marketing world. 2 years at the company he started with Lily, terminated abruptly. Before that, nothing since the consultancy we'd run together. And tucked between the bullet points was a single, desperate line, seeking opportunities to reestablish my professional reputation. I almost laughed. David never used to care about reputation. He thought charisma could get him out of anything. But charisma doesn't pay severance packages. That afternoon, I called Sophia. "You're not going to believe who applied for a job here." She didn't miss a beat. "Let me guess, tall, smug, and allergic to loyalty?" "Bingo," she gasped. "Oh, this is good. This is so good. What's the plan? Public humiliation? Death by 1,000 passive-aggressive emails?" "Not yet," I said. "First, I need to know exactly how far he's fallen." 3 years ago, when David walked out, I'd made myself a promise. Never waste pain. If something hurts, you make it useful. You turn it into fuel, leverage, momentum. That promise had built Alvarez Strategies from the ground up. I started digging. Within an hour, I had the whole picture. David and Lily had launched their visionary marketing firm with a champagne reception and a rented rooftop venue. For the first 6 months, they did well, thanks in large part to the clients David had poached from me. But then, the younger woman did what younger women with big ambitions often do. She realized she didn't need him. She'd courted her own network, landed a major account, and according to a very talkative source from their former team, started seeing a venture capitalist on the side. One day, she simply didn't come in. 2 weeks later, she'd filed papers to dissolve the partnership and launched her own boutique agency, without him. The fallout was brutal. Clients followed her, not him. Debt piled up. Eventually, he had to shutter the company entirely. I sat back, processing all of it. David hadn't just lost Lily. He'd lost his business, his income, his carefully cultivated image as the man who always landed on his feet. And now he was here. I didn't make my decision about him right away. That would have been too easy, too impulsive. No, this required precision. For 2 weeks, I let HR run the usual process. First-round interviews, skills assessments, reference checks. All the while, I kept my distance, letting him think his fate was in someone else's hands. But behind the scenes, I was making calls, to old contacts, to mutual acquaintances, to people who still thought of me as David's wife until I corrected them. I learned 2 crucial things. He was burning through the last of his savings. He'd been rejected from 3 other firms in the past month, 2 of them run by people we used to outbid for clients. It was almost poetic. The day before his final interview, Monica knocked on my door. "You're 10 a.m. tomorrow? Should I block off extra time?" "Yes," I said. "I think we might need it." I could see the curiosity in her eyes, but she knew better than to ask. That night, I went home and poured myself a glass of Malbec. I sat by the window of my apartment, the one I'd upgraded to last year, with floor-to-ceiling views of the skyline, and thought about the last 3 years. The late nights, the near misses, the moments when I doubted myself so much I almost called him. If I'd done that, if I'd let him hear even a tremor of weakness, he would have smiled that smug, patient smile and told me I'd never make it without him. But I had made it. I'd done more than make it. I'd built something he couldn't touch. And tomorrow, I was going to let him sit in my office and realize that fact in real time. The next morning, I arrived early. I wore a black dress with a high neckline and a gold cuff bracelet. Simple, elegant, impossible to ignore. I wanted to look like exactly what I'd become, untouchable. When David walked in for the interview, I didn't offer a handshake. Instead, I gestured toward the chair across from my desk. "Let's talk about your qualifications," I said. He launched into the rehearsed pitch: team leadership, client relations, strategic vision. But I'd known him long enough to recognize the subtle shift in his tone. The confidence was forced now, layered over the kind of nervous energy you get when you know you're on trial. I asked questions I knew would sting. Why did your last partnership end? What's your experience handling client loss? How do you rebuild trust when it's been broken? Each time, his answer was careful, polished, and each time I pressed just a little harder. By the 40-minute mark, there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Halfway through, I asked the question I'd been saving. "David, in your opinion, what's the biggest professional mistake you've ever made?" His eyes flickered. He knew exactly what I was asking. I underestimated the importance of the right partners, he said slowly. "Partners," I repeated. "Not employees? Partners, the people you trust to build something with you." I leaned back, letting the silence draw out just long enough for him to feel it. After the interview, I told him we'd be in touch. He stood to leave, then hesitated. "Carmen, this job, I really need it." It was the first time I'd ever heard David Alvarez, once the most self-assured man I knew, admit need. I kept my face neutral. "We'll let you know." When he left, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Revenge is sweeter when it's deliberate, not rushed. That afternoon, I called Sophia again. "He's perfect for the role," I said. "Perfect as in qualified, or perfect as in poetic justice?" "Both," she laughed. "God, I wish I could be a fly on the wall when you tell him." "Oh, I'm not going to just tell him," I said. "I'm going to make him prove himself, to me." I gave HR the green light. 2 days later, David got the call. He was hired. His first day would be Monday, and I already had the first test planned. 3 years earlier, when David left, he told me Lily challenged him in ways I didn't, that she kept him on his toes. Well, let's see how he liked being kept on his toes now. The weekend before he started, I went into the office and rearranged the seating chart. I placed his desk directly outside my glass-walled office, close enough for me to hear every client call, every awkward pause. I also reassigned one of our trickiest accounts to him on day one, a client known for impossible deadlines and no patience for excuses. If David still had the charm he once wielded like a weapon, he'd survive. If not, well, that would tell me everything I needed to know. Monday morning came. I arrived early again, coffee in hand, ready. At 8:57 a.m., David walked in. His suit fit better this time. He smiled, tentatively, when he saw me. "Morning, Carmen." "Morning, David. Ready to get started?" "As I'll ever be." I handed him the client file. "This is yours. They want a proposal by Friday. They're not easy, but if you can win them over, it'll be a good start." He took the file, brows lifting slightly as he scanned the details. "Tough one." "Consider it your welcome gift," I said. All day I watched him work. He didn't slack off. He didn't roll his eyes when given feedback. He took notes, stayed late, and though he didn't say it, seemed determined to prove himself. Part of me hated that I noticed. Hated that I saw flashes of the man I married, the one who could win over anyone with the right combination of wit and sincerity. But the other part of me remembered exactly how dangerous that charm could be, and I had no intention of letting it work on me again. By Thursday, he had the bones of a solid proposal. By Friday morning, it was polished. He asked me to review it before sending it to the client. I read it in silence. It was good. Too good. "Not bad," I said finally. "Not bad?" he asked, a flicker of the old arrogance in his voice. I met his eyes. "Don't get comfortable." That afternoon, the client called. They loved it, wanted to sign immediately. David smiled when I told him, "Guess I've still got it." I returned the smile, but mine didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, you've got something," I said. "Let's see how long it lasts." Because in my mind, this wasn't about whether David could win over a client. It was about whether he could face the one person he'd burned completely and come out on the other side. And I hadn't even begun turning the screws. By Monday morning, David had been with the company for a week. He'd won the client, met his deadlines, and, annoyingly, hadn't yet given me the satisfaction of watching him fail. That was fine. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge came not from watching someone collapse, but from watching them squirm while holding it together. And I had just the thing to make him squirm. I called him into my office. "David, I've got another project for you. High priority, discretion required." He straightened in the doorway. "Of course, what's the account?" I slid a folder across the desk. "Everglade Resorts." His eyes flickered. "We pitched them back He caught himself. At my old firm. Didn't get it." I leaned back, folding my hands. "Well, we did, and they're hosting a summit next week. I need you to attend, alone." His brows lifted. "Alone? Consider it a test of trust. I'll expect a full report and recommendations when you get back." He hesitated just a fraction too long before nodding. "I can handle it," I smiled. "Good, because failure isn't really an option on this one." The reason I'd picked Everglade wasn't random. 3 years ago, right after the divorce, David and Lily had tried to poach them from another agency. I'd heard about it through the grapevine. They'd pitched an overblown, under-researched proposal that made the CEO of Everglade roll her eyes so hard you could hear it over the phone. That CEO, Melanie Chen, happened to be a friend of mine now, and Melanie remembered everything. The night before the trip, I sent her a text. "He'll be there tomorrow. Feel free to be honest." Her reply came 2 minutes later. "With pleasure." David left for the summit looking tense. When he returned 3 days later, he came straight to my office. "Here's the report," he said, placing it on my desk. I flipped through it casually. "How was it?" His jaw worked. "Productive." I raised an eyebrow. "That's it? Just productive?" He met my gaze. "Melanie was polite," I chuckled. "Ah, so she remembered you." He didn't answer. That was the first time I saw it. The crack in his armor, a flicker of something almost like shame, and it made me curious. That Friday evening, I stayed late at the office, catching up on emails. Most of the team had already gone home. David was still at his desk, finishing a call. When he hung up, he came to my door. "Can we talk?" I gestured for him to sit. He took a breath. "I know you didn't have to hire me, and I know I wasn't a good husband to you." I stayed silent. He continued. "When I left, I thought I was trading in for a better version of my life. I told myself it was about excitement, ambition, all that crap. But really, I think I just wanted someone who saw me as more than I was." "And Lily did?" I asked. "For a while." His mouth twisted. "Until she didn't need me anymore." I should have felt triumphant hearing him say that. Instead, I just felt something heavier. Not sympathy exactly, more like confirmation of what I'd always suspected. He'd chosen her not because she was better, but because she made him feel bigger. He rubbed his face with his hands. After she left, I kept waiting for someone to pick me. Clients, friends, anyone. But I'd burned too many bridges. "That tends to happen," I said, "when you think you're fireproof." He gave a humorless laugh. "Yeah, learned that the hard way." That night, I went home and opened a bottle of wine. I sat by my window, looking out at the city lights, and thought about the next step. David was still standing, but for the first time since he walked into my office, I could see the foundation under him starting to crumble. And I wanted to know just how far I could push before it collapsed. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week later, our company hosted a networking gala at one of the nicest hotels downtown. We'd invited clients, partners, and a few prospective big fish. I made sure David was assigned to the welcoming committee, shaking hands, making introductions. Halfway through the evening, I spotted her. Lily. She looked exactly the same, polished, predatory, wearing a red dress that screamed for attention. She was on the arm of some slick-looking finance guy, and she hadn't seen me yet. When she did, her eyes narrowed. Then she saw David and smiled. I watched from a distance as she approached him. The exchange was short, too short to hear, but I didn't need the words. David's posture stiffened. Lily's expression shifted from smug to something almost pitying. Then she walked away, not even glancing back. When David caught my eye across the room, he looked gutted. Later, after the event, I found him sitting alone in the corner of the terrace, nursing a drink. "She tell you she's sorry?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, she told me she's engaged, to a man twice as rich and half as patient." I leaned against the railing. "And how did that make you feel?" Like I was never anything more than a stepping stone. It was tempting to say, "Welcome to my world," but instead I just sipped my wine. "Funny thing about stepping stones," I said finally. Sometimes the people who step on them end up in the water anyway. The next week, I started phase 2. I assigned David to a team project with Sophia, my closest ally in the company and someone who'd been in my corner since the divorce. I told her, push him. Don't make it easy. She did exactly that. Deadlines, revisions, last-minute pivots. David got the full treatment. And to his credit, he didn't complain. He delivered. But by Friday, I saw it again. That flicker of exhaustion, the faint slump in his shoulders. After everyone left that evening, I called him into my office. "You've done good work," I said. He blinked, as if he hadn't expected the compliment. "Thank you." "But," I continued, "I have to ask, what's your end game here, David? Why this job? Why me?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because," he said finally, "I don't just want a paycheck. I want to make things right. And I can't do that anywhere else but here." Something in his tone made me pause. This wasn't the cocky, invincible man I'd been married to. This was someone who'd been stripped down to whatever was left when all the armor was gone. It would have been easy to use that, to twist the knife, but for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. When he left my office that night, I sat there, in the quiet, thinking about the last 3 years. Revenge had fueled me. It had gotten me through nights when I didn't think I could keep going. But now, with him in front of me every day, I started to wonder, if I stripped him down to nothing, would that victory feel as sweet as I'd imagined? Or would it just feel empty? The answer would come sooner than I thought. 2 weeks later, the quarterly board meeting was looming, and I saw my chance. The boardroom at Alvarez Strategies was a sleek, glass-walled rectangle with a polished mahogany table and a view that made even seasoned executives pause. It was where reputations were made or destroyed in a matter of minutes. I decided David would give the main presentation. It wasn't cruelty. Not exactly. It was an experiment. If he crushed it, the board would see him as an asset. If he choked, he'd do it in front of the most influential people in my company. Either way, I'd have my answer. The morning of the meeting, I found him at his desk, reviewing slides. His suit was perfectly pressed, his tie a deep navy that didn't scream for attention. He looked calm. "You ready?" I asked. He met my eyes. "I think so." I leaned on the edge of his desk. "David, this isn't just a pitch. The board will want answers about numbers, projections, risk. You slip up, they'll smell it." "I understand." He paused. "Thanks for the opportunity." Something in his voice caught me off guard. It wasn't gratitude laced with manipulation. It was plain, sincere. At 10 a.m., the board filed in. 7 men and women in tailored suits, all sharp eyes and measured words. David stood at the head of the table with his laptop already connected to the big screen. For the next 35 minutes, he walked them through the strategy. Clear, concise, no fluff. He anticipated their questions before they asked them, backing up every claim with data. When he finished, there was a brief silence. Then one of the board members, a notoriously hard sell, said, "Impressive work, Mr. Alvarez." I watched David absorb the compliment without that old smirk of his. Just a nod. When the meeting adjourned, I stayed behind, stacking my notes. David lingered in the doorway. "You set me up, didn't you?" he said quietly. I smiled. "Maybe. You passed." That evening, as the office emptied, I asked him to step into my office. "You've done well here," I said, leaning back in my chair. "But I've been asking myself a question for weeks. Is this really about the job, or is it about us?" He didn't flinch. "Both." "Explain." He ran a hand over his jaw. "When I walked out 3 years ago, I told myself I was chasing something better. But the truth? I was running from the fact that I didn't think I deserved what I had, with you. I figured if I left first, I wouldn't have to face that." "And Lily?" I asked. She was a mirror. For a while, she reflected back the man I wanted to believe I was, but when she stopped, there was nothing there. I studied him. He wasn't looking for pity. He wasn't even asking for forgiveness. He was just telling the truth. I thought about all the ways I could end this. I could fire him tomorrow and feel justified. I could keep him in a low-level role, a reminder of what he'd lost. But none of those options felt right anymore. "David," I said, "I brought you here because I wanted to see you sweat. I wanted you to feel what it's like to work for someone you underestimated. And you've done that. But somewhere along the way, I stopped wanting to crush you." He was silent. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep working here. You're going to keep earning your place. And maybe, you'll earn back something else. His brow furrowed. Your trust? I shook my head. Your respect for yourself. That's the only way any of this means anything. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he nodded once, slowly. Fair enough, he said. Over the next few months, I watched him change. Not overnight, not in some cinematic rush of redemption, but in small, consistent ways. He took on tough projects without complaint. He gave credit to his team instead of hoarding it. He stopped trying to charm his way through problems and started solving them. It was strange at first, seeing him like this, like the man I married had been dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. The real test came one afternoon in late spring. We were in the middle of prepping for a massive client pitch when a last-minute crisis hit. Half the presentation files corrupted. 3 years ago, David would have cursed, blamed someone else, and walked away to take a call. This time, he stayed. For 8 straight hours, he worked alongside the team, recreating every slide from scratch. We won the account, and when the client shook his hand and told him he'd done an excellent job, David simply said, "Couldn't have done it without the team." It wasn't lost on me that I'd gotten exactly what I'd wanted from the beginning. Not revenge, but proof. Proof that the man who'd once thrown me away could stand in front of me, humbled, and choose to be better. One Friday evening as we were leaving the office, he stopped me at the elevator. "Carmen," he said, "I know I've got a long way to go, but thank you. Not for the job, though I needed it, but for not giving up on the possibility that I could change." I looked at him for a long moment. "You're welcome, but don't thank me yet. The hard part's not changing, it's staying changed." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. "See you Monday." That night, I went home and opened a bottle of wine. I thought about the last 3 years, about the wreckage I'd crawled out of, and about the man who'd caused it, now sitting at a desk outside my office, working for me. The bitterness I'd carried for so long wasn't gone completely, but it had softened, reshaped into something I hadn't expected. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about excusing what happened. It was about deciding that the past didn't get to control the rest of the story. And in this story, I was the one writing the ending. The following Monday, as I walked into the office, I caught David looking out the window at the city skyline. "Beautiful view," he said. "It is," I agreed. Then I added, "Took me a long time to get here." He nodded. "Me too." For the first time in years, the words didn't feel like a lie.